Good afternoon, everybody, on a sweltering hot day in June. I think everyone is sweating where I'm down here in Guildford. And how about you, Chris? How are you doing up there in the north? Is it as hot there?
I was saying it's not very often up in the northwest of England that we can say that the temperature is 30 degrees and it's absolutely sweltering. So quite frankly, I'm enjoying the moment.
Well, for those who don't know Chris, and I'm sure virtually the whole UK dental industry knows Chris. You've been around, I won't say, Rob, probably over 30 years in the sector, I imagine. Is that right?
Although my first dentist was 1993, my first client in dentistry was actually 1987. And the reason for that was because during that first 6-year period, I was building up a client base of dental laboratories, largely a combination of word of mouth and public speaking. But it was only 6 years into the dental technicians. The very first one of those technicians actually said, I've got a dentist client of mine who I think I could use a bit of help. And that began that journey. It's almost 40 years since the first person in dentistry. Wow. And I think you're similar timescale, Aaron, is that right?
A little bit short, 24 years. I got dragged into the sector because I married a dentist, okay? And still married, okay? So that's a success, I guess. And she'll come around here hitting me on the head in a minute, but we're still married, and she still runs her clinic, Smita. And yeah, since that very first client of Smita, then slowly added clients over the years, dotted around. So yeah, been all good. But today we're going to be talking live and uncut about what, Chris? You describe it.
What we wanted, I think, to start this series of conversations about was talking about not doom and gloom. What we want to do is to bring a combined 65 years of experience of working with dental businesses, in this particular case, June 2026, to look at the reality of the landscape in which we're operating at the moment, to have no holds barred in terms of describing the challenges that we're all facing in the marketplace at the moment, and also hopefully for the two of us to share with you some tips and ideas and top tactics that might help us to navigate through that landscape. We can spend the next 30 minutes talking about the bottle being half empty and oh my God, there's white space, and oh my God, it's challenging in the marketplace. The NHS contract changes are difficult to understand. Oh my God, corporates are out there doing what corporates do. What are we going to do about it as independent practice owners? That's the half empty conversation. I'm going to come back to some of that in a minute. But let's just also remind ourselves that there is a half full conversation that says that the digital workflow in dentistry is more exciting today than it has ever been in the decades that the two of us have operated within the sector. And also what I'm going to say, and we're aiming this podcast at independent, owner-managed dental practices, both mixed and private and specialist. We're aiming ourselves at a place in the middle of the market where on one side of the market, we've got corporates. And when on the other side of the market, we've got what I'm going to describe as the full NHS landscape. And there's a place in the middle, which is mixed and private practices. We want to address ourselves to those people. And I think that we in that particular place are in a sweet spot at the moment where there is an unprecedented opportunity for us to go out into the marketplace and to do things that fully NHS practices can't do, and to do things that corporates can't do, and to carve out a space for ourselves in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add one point to this, Chris. You pretty succinctly put that. But as you said, that gap in that middle market is where the opportunity lies. I think over the last few years, we've seen many groups emerge, people buying, acquiring, but integrating those practices together, it hasn't actually worked particularly well for many of those groups, okay? And the whole idea or the whole premise of that was they're going to buy a few practices and at a certain multiple and consolidate it together and sell it on to a new party who will pay even more for it at a higher multiple. But those higher multiple paying parties aren't really there at the moment, for sure. So for many people who are running their private practices, you have to think, well, I might be 20 years into my career. I might want to have an exit strategy, but maybe now is not the right time to exit to one of those parties where you might have to get rolled over equity, all that type of stuff. And maybe re-engineer your business, look at your business again and run it to its optimum. Okay. And that's what I think many practices will have to do over the next few years, is look at their practices, optimize it, introduce AI, introduce technology, introduce new workflows, And that then is a real opportunity. And when you own 1 or 2 practices, it's so much easier to manage as opposed to when you've got 10 practices, 20 practices, 50 practices, okay? And that's where I think a lot of those groups may become unstuck or are becoming unstuck already. But let's move on to our first question today, Chris. Pricing. Now, we were talking earlier, you were talking about operating costs in a surgery have shot up over the last 4 or 5 years. In your experience, talking to lots of practices, I know you probably talk to them more than I do. I'm more of the finance guy, but what have you seen, and what's the impact on practice morale, performance, etc.?
Yeah. All right. So let's first of all get a very, very quick, rough and ready definition in place. Operating cost per surgery per day. One of the most important numbers in dentistry that a lot of dental practice owners don't actually know. So what is it? The question is, in any business, if you look at your profit and loss statement, you'll see sales at the top. You'll see something that accountants will either call variable expenses or cost of goods sold or cost of goods. And that will be expenses that only arise when dentistry takes place. So that will be your lab bills, it will be your material costs, and also, of course, it will be the remuneration for your self-employed clinicians. And then below that, you'll see another heading which will either say fixed costs, overheads, operating costs. And that's the money that you have to spend whether or not there's any patients in the building. If it snows for a week,
you have to open the door up to pay the electricity bill, etc. So
exactly right. It snows for a week, nobody comes in, or we have a heat wave and nobody comes in. But you've still got to pay the mortgage, you've still got to pay the council tax, you've still got to pay the payroll costs for all of your employees. They are fixed costs. You've got to pay no matter what. And one of the exercises that Arun and I will do with any client is to say, let's work out those fixed costs on a daily basis and let's divide them by the number of chairs that are in use, underline in use. Let's work out this magic number, operating costs per surgery, per utilized surgery per day. So let's go back to 2022. Boris Johnson, rather ironically, given the date and the week on which we are recording this first broadcast, Boris Johnson is being marched out of Downing Street by his own party. And little do we know that Liz Truss is going to walk in the door and is going to institute a few weeks of utter economic chaos. But at the moment in time where Boris Johnson is saying bye-bye, you look across a cohort of independent owner-managed dental practices in the UK and Ireland, and you will see an operating cost per surgery per day running in the region of about £450. Now, let's just do statistics. That's a bell curve, and there are some that are more expensive than that, and there are some that are less expensive than that. But up on the top of the bell curve, 450 per day to open a surgery is around about your average. We're now going to fast forward the clock to this week, and Keir Starmer is being marched out of Parliament by his own party. Funny how things work out. And that same practice with those same people doing that same thing in that same building, no change, but that operating cost is now £850. Again, top of the bell curve. That's an 89% increase in 4 years. So I'm going to ask a rhetorical question of the listeners. Number one, if you've got a dental plan, has the cost of that plan gone up by 89% in the last 4 years? Number two, if we were going to do a screenshot of your fee per item price list, has that price list gone up by 89% in the last 4 years? And we all know the answer's no. And the reason that no, Arun, why haven't they put the prices up in line with increases in operating costs?
Well, good question. Now, if you look at the 89%, as Chris has mentioned, if I look at our client base, it may not be 89%, but some might be higher, some might be lower. But the point we're trying to make is they've gone up significantly, okay? And it's not just in dental, as we've seen in the restaurant trade. Business rates have gone up, the electricity's gone up, staff costs have gone up, national insurance costs have risen as a result of the change in government. So all of these costs have compounded. Now, to answer your question, why haven't that been reflected in pricing in dental practices? Mainly because of fear, I personally think. I think people are scared. If I put my prices up by 10%, 20%, 30%, 50%, whatever, they worry. Now, I know clients back in 2022, they were charging, like, say, $2,500 for an implant. The same, they still charge $2,500 for an implant now. Okay, and that seems to be the standard price that everyone just charges for an implant, maybe £2,500 to £3,000 as an example. Invisalign costs have gone up. Software costs have gone up, but none of the pricing has been reflected in that. So ultimately, as an accountant, you see the margins just squeezing each year, whether you're doing monthly accounts, annual accounts, you just see, well, the problem that many dentists used to moan about before is that, oh, my tax bill's too high. That question isn't being raised as much as now because their profits are being diminished and therefore they're not having to pay so much tax. So I guess there's something good in that. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's the fear they have of what will my customers do? What will they say? Now, I was in London last night on a Monday, okay, in a pub in Soho. It was rammed, okay. To buy a pint of Guinness, I think it was £10.50 or something like that from memory, okay. Back in 2022, I think the average price of a Guinness was around £4. So, this pub, a very average pub in Soho, but packed. It was hot weather, people want to get a drink. But what I'm trying to say is that people still have that demand. People want to go. People want to do these things. And if they're getting good service, getting good experiences, they'll come and go and enjoy those things, whether it's going to a pub, whether it's going to a restaurant, or whether it's going to go and see their dentist to get their teeth done and look after their health. Because ultimately, that's what dentistry is about, is looking after your well-being and your health for the long term. So the point I want to make here is that you shouldn't be scared to raise your fees, okay? It's an opportunity, as Chris outlined right at the beginning, it's an opportunity to offer new services. And therefore you can then, if you raise your fees, you can then invest in other things in your team, in your environment, in your products, whatever you want to do in your clinic. And I think if you can overcome that fear factor, and you don't have to raise them all in 89% in one go, far from it. You might just do 10% here, 20% on one service. Look at your different product lines. And if you use something like Dentally or Software of Excellence, you can run your whole fee items, and some things you might put up by 50% and some things you might put up by 10%. A great example would be x-rays, little bite wing x-rays. You might be charging 10 quid a bite wing x-ray, but if you put them up to 14 quid, that's a 40% increase. But think about how many bite wing x-rays you do a year. Probably thousands. £4 on thousands of bite wing x-rays is a lot of margin. So that's what you need to start thinking, breaking it down granularly to then think, what can I put up and what can I do and how can I do it to overcome that fear and to actually do it.
And I think you make
Chris?
a very important point that one of the things that I talk to my clients about is prices which are sensitive and non-sensitive. And so sensitive price would be the cost of a dental health review or checkup or whatever it is you want to call it, because people remember what they paid 6 months ago. Sensitive price is a fee per item hygiene visit because I remember what I paid 6 months ago. Sensitive price, interestingly, is my dental plan. And of course, one of the particular challenges with a dental plan is that there's often a contractual obligation only to review that price once a year. And the reality, again, is that the fear factor steps into the plan pricing because they think, oh my God, we're already running at 25 quid a month. We don't want to put it up by 20% because if we do a 20% price increase, all the plan members are going to leave. Now, there's no evidence to support that fear. In fact, the real evidence, and it's hard and concrete evidence, is that during 2020, when we had lockdown and when we had the return to work period, if you look across the plan providers, there was nearly 97% loyalty from plan members who carried on paying all the way through lockdown and also carried on paying all the way through the return to work phase, even though there may have been a delay in getting them back in line with their review system. And there are two more sensitive prices that I want to talk about. Invisalign is a sensitive price because it's the world's greatest globally commoditized product. And every Tom, Dick, and Harry knows what the price of Invisalign because they're bombarded with Facebook and Instagram advertising all day long. And of course, the price of a single restored implant is sensitive because, again, there's a lot of internet marketing that goes on that promotes prices within that particular commodity because dental implants have become a commoditized price. But as we said earlier on, there are individual items of treatment and there are also individual treatment plans. And an individual item of treatment, the last time I had a crown replaced was a number of years ago. And so I don't remember what I paid for it. And also if a dentist is putting a bespoke treatment plan together for me, which involves multiple treatment modalities, that's my treatment plan, and I'm not comparing it with the guy down the road who had another treatment plan for a completely different modality. So what you've got to do is you've got to really get savvy and say, think about sensitive and non-sensitive prices. And as you say quite rightly, Aaron, think about where you can implement higher increases into non-sensitive pricing areas within your practice, because they accumulate like a snowball, and the more you do of it, the better it's going to get. So what we end up with is two ways of pricing. There's emotional pricing. Look at what everybody else in the postcode is charging and think about your own fear factor. Scientific pricing, which is open up an Excel spreadsheet, and people like you and I have got plenty of templates that we can share with people, and conduct a forensic analysis of the operating costs of your business. Transfer that into a spreadsheet that can spew out even faster nowadays with the help of AI generated systems to give you a scientific price list. Take a look at what that tells you about the gap. And as you say quite rightly, Aaron, we might not be able to bridge the gap in one go, but what we might do is to have a plan that says over the next 8 quarters, we're going to have incremental increases in various prices across our list, which are going to get us back to our again.
Absolutely. And I think if you go back to the final point on pricing here, Chris, is that you can buy a normal handbag which costs you 100 quid. You can buy a handbag that costs you £10,000. It's still doing the same job. But what I'm trying to get across is this: the value that people pay, or they've perceived to get, okay, when they're buying the £10,000 handbag. So the same principle applies when it's to dentistry. As you said, it's a bespoke service, bespoke treatment plan, fully explained, fully detailed, with the right technology, with the right clinician, with the right experience and history. It's how you present that value, okay, that makes the difference, and how you communicate that to your patients or potential patients. And I think many dentists may historically, and I think it's less so in the young guys I see now, but historically, when they've been tainted by the NHS, they have that lack of confidence to put their prices up. But sometimes it's the younger guys who haven't been tainted perhaps by the NHS. They have the opportunity, oh yeah, I did this, I can do this, and they happily will charge the right price to get the right kind of margin for their services. So have that inner confidence to help. And I think that's a really important point just to highlight at this stage. Do you agree with that, Chris, or not?
I do. I want to share with you something that actually happened to me at 2:30 this afternoon. I had a Zoom call with a dentist who I bumped into at a practice plan regional workshop about 6 months ago. Now, whenever practice plan asks me to do a regional workshop, the Chris Barrow workshop is always a 3-hour money talk. And what I mean by that is that it's a 3-hour presentation, which is very much based around this kind of area that we're talking about, which is under the numbers within your own practice and making sure that not only is your pricing right, but also that the productivity of your individual clinicians is right as well. And we'll undoubtedly on this podcast series, we will cover other aspects of that, because we need to talk about remuneration for self-employed clinicians. We need to talk about clinician productivity and profitability, and we're going to go there. But I spoke to this dentist at 2:30 today, and as I always do with a call like that, how can I help? Let's call him John, because that's not his name. And I said, John, how can I help? And he said, I heard you speak. Me and my practice manager came to your practice plan regional workshop 6 months ago. You were doing the money course. And he said, it felt like you were drilling into my head with the stuff that you were talking about in terms of understanding, analysing, interpreting your own data. And actually, we came away from that workshop and my practice manager said she felt the same way as well. And we've gone 6 months down the line. He said, I bought this practice 5 years ago. I'm making an okay living, but I'm working my tripe out. I own the business. I don't know the numbers in detail. And I'm becoming increasingly concerned that because I don't know the numbers, I'm really kind of flying blind. And he said, I wish I'd called you 5 years ago, but I didn't. And I wish I'd called you 6 months ago, but I didn't. But I'm calling you now. And I said, okay, great. I said, John, here's what we're going to do. You're going to send me your last set of audited accounts, and you're going to send me whatever up-to-date management accounts or financial data you've got. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a financial MOT, and we're going to look at those numbers, I'm going to come back to you, practice manager, and I'm probably going to ask 100 questions. And over the next week ahead, what we'll do is that we'll create a full financial analysis and come back to you with prioritized recommendation as to the steps that you need to be taking in order to move towards a target profitability. Now, I very much suspect, Aaron, that had he been speaking to you at 2:30 this afternoon, he'd have been getting exactly the same feedback that I gave him, correct?
Absolutely. And that John is a common person I talk to on a regular basis, my team talks to, where they're flying blind. And you could fly blind as a dentist maybe 5 years ago. It was quite easy to. It was easy to. The margins were big enough. The money coming in was good. Today, if you're flying blind, you are potentially digging your kind of hole further deeper and deeper. And when I have clients now who they do their annual accounts, they have no idea if they've made money or not made money in the year, how much tax they got to pay. This kind of goes on to the other question we were going to talk about. But the point I'm trying to make is that you have got to have visibility of your numbers month by month, okay? Or worst case scenario, quarter by quarter. But I still think the vast majority of dental practices across the UK just still do annual sets of accounts. They don't have monthly or have quarterly, let alone monthly, okay? And I think that's a big gap. And in the good times, that was fine. But in these current times, you really need to be on it, as you just highlighted, Chris, because you will then be able to make adjustments, change pricing, change costs, cut costs, make better decisions on the performance of the business. And that is something that it was all too easy for dentists to make money historically. It's a very different game now. Do you agree?
Yeah. We're recording this podcast the day after Keir Starmer resigned. We're moving into a period now of uncertainty. We don't know who the next Prime Minister is going to be, although obviously it's not going to be too difficult to imagine.
Someone from your neck.
But we certainly don't know who the next Chancellor is going to be. And we certainly don't know what the economic policy of the government is going to be going forward. But it's a reasonable bet that it's going to be a challenging economic period for all of us. And the all of us means our patients, all of us means our self-employed clinicians, it means our salaried team members, and it means us as owners of our own businesses. And so flying blind, winging it is not an option in June 2026. And if you're sitting here listening to this broadcast and you're thinking, okay, well, I get cloud-based accountancy, I get up-to-date management accounts at the end of every month, I analyze all of my key performance indicators at the end of every month in line with benchmarks, I keep an eye on my operating cost per surgery per day, I also measure the individual profitability of every single fee earner in my practice on a month-by-month basis. And as a result of that, I make adjustments to my fee per item price list on a quarterly basis. If your answer is yes to those 7 points, then get off this podcast. You don't need us. You go and do something else.
And you're doing really well, and you're a rarity in the dental sector, to be honest with you. Good luck to you.
If you're not able to answer those 7 points, and if you are to whatever extent flying blind or partially blind, then what I'm saying is this: stick with us on this podcast series, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be diving deeper in this area. We're going to be looking much more carefully at each of those 7 points going forward. And we're going to be sharing with you what we believe are real-time, contemporary tips and tactics and strategies in order to make sure that, number one, you are measuring those numbers, but also, of course, what to do, because it's all very well measuring the numbers, but when the numbers tell you that you're not running profitably, what do we do next? And you know what? There are some massive questions here. What do we do when our operating cost per surgery per day is out of control? What do we do when our lab or material or advertising costs are higher than benchmark? We're out of control with it. And most importantly of all, what do we do when we analyze the individual profitability and productivity of our self-employed fee earners, and we suddenly realize that the reason that why we as an owner are working our tripe out, trying to deliver as much dentistry as we possibly can is because we've got other self-employed clinicians in the building who are doing the best, but we're losing money.
Yeah, and that's what I see all too often. Many, you might have a practice, let's say have 4 or 5 associates. 1 or 2 might be doing pretty well. They're grossing quite well. But what are their overheads? Okay, what are their lab costs? What are these things? And are they at the end of the day making you a decent ROI? There might be someone generally doing lower volume or lower value production, but they still might be making you more money. And that's the thing is that visibility is the thing that really matters here. And as Chris said, you ultimately wanted them to be able to see which dentist ultimately is making you net money, okay, or net, who is the most profitable dentist in there. And therefore you can adjust your book, you can adjust giving patients to those more profitable dentists. All these things matter, okay? But if you don't have the visibility, that was when it all goes pear-shaped. So I'm conscious now, Chris, we've been talking for over 30 minutes here, and we don't want to drag this on for hours. I mean, we could do, but there's one question I want to cover, and this will probably take to the rest of the podcast up, is obviously you were talking about operating costs per utilized dental surgery. But if you had to look at 3 numbers that a practice should be tracking month by month, what would they be? What would you choose? I've got my own choice, okay? But what would be yours? And then I can then tell you mine.
All right, my top 3 choices. Number 1, top of the list, operating cost per utilized surgery, one that we've just been talking about. Number 2 is percentage chair utilization. If you have a chair in your practice, what percentage of time has that chair got a patient sat in it? So facility utilization is number 2. And then number 3, back to what I was mentioning earlier, is the individual profitability of every fee earner in your practice. With those 3, you can change the world.
Okay, very good. So I'll give you my 3, and there's overlap, there's no doubt about it. And I'll sound like a real accountant here by saying I would look at EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax and depreciation, ultimately the net profit or the profitability of the clinic. You can have all the revenue in the world, but if you aren't tracking your costs accurately, you don't really know what you're making. And remember, EBITDA is ultimately the determinant of the value of your business, okay? A multiple will be applied against it. So if you are looking to sell at some point in the future, you always need to be thinking, okay, what is my EBITDA? Because that's what a valuer will look at. That's what a buyer will look at. Are they generating a healthy EBITDA or not so healthy EBITDA? And a multiple will be applied. And as Chris quite rightly said, you can then break that down, that EBITDA down into individuals' EBITDA per associate dentist and work out, okay, that one's making me money, that one's not making me money. What do we do and what do we change? So that's one thing, EBITDA. The other one I would look at is recall rate, okay? You might have this base of patients in your books. Let's say you have 2,000 patients on your books, okay? But are they coming back for recalls? Okay, you can send the emails, you can send the reminders, but what is that recall rate? Do they come back every 6 months? Do the hygiene people come back every 6 months for their hygiene treatments? Because ultimately they are your patients, existing patients, and therefore are you maximizing that existing patient base as opposed to having to keep getting new patients through the door? New patients are very, very important, and I would track that as another metric, but not so much as how good my recall rate is. And in my view, what you want to be getting that over 90%, or have systems in place to try and get that recall rate over 90. And then ultimately, the last one in my mind is case rates, okay? You can put all the cases out there, treatment plans out there, and you might have a $1,000 treatment plan or a $10,000 treatment plan, but how many of those 100 treatment plans you put out there got accepted? Okay. It might look wonderful on paper, it might look wonderful on a screen, you send it all out, but did they actually get accepted? And that's a really important thing to measure. Now, if you combine my 3 with Chris's 3, I think you've got a really good working model. But you need to be able to track these. You need to be able to see these, and you need to be able to see these in an instant, okay? And I think that's where dentistry is going, okay? The technology historically hasn't allowed people to do that, but I think that's emerging, and various systems are coming together that will allow people to do this. And it's an exciting time in dentistry, as Chris highlighted right at the beginning. Yes, there are threats. Yes, there are problems. Yes, the economic conditions, new prime minister, all these things are happening there. But if you embrace and understand the numbers, I think that will help you tell your own story and drive your own story forward. And that's the exciting time, I personally think, that's there in dentistry going forward. We're always going to have a tumultuous time, I think, over the next 10 years. I think dentistry is been like that for a number of years. I think our political environment will be like this for the next few years. Currently, we're getting a new prime minister. I don't know how long he or she will last. Okay, until the next. So you've got to be able to drive your own business through this whilst we're navigating these uncharted times. Okay, so yeah, 3 numbers of mine, 3 numbers of Chris. I think that's kind of would be a good thing for you to cover. Any further thoughts on that, Chris?
Not for now. I think what I want to say to our listeners is, as we've explained, this is the first of a brand new series. We're, in a sense, we're kind of taking a punt on putting this out there and saying, listen, what we want to do is the 2 of us want to come back on a regular basis from the perspective of accountancy and business development advice. There'll be no teeth and gums on this series. Sorry for all the geeky dentists. But what is going to be in this series is a lot of very straight talking business advice, because our hope is to help you to grow businesses that can survive and prosper through whatever challenges that we have ahead. And we're making a promise to ourselves that we're not going to be diplomatic. We're not going to pull any punches. We are going to be respectful and polite and courteous, both to each other and to the people that we talk about as well. But
at the same time, yeah.
We want straight talking of finance. That's where we're going with this thing. So if you've enjoyed it, look out for future episodes. If you've enjoyed it and you're seeing this on anything like a social media post, share it with other people, and maybe just a word to say, hey, let's keep tabs on what these 2 are up to, and stay with them. And by the way, we will be creating environments in which you can ask us questions either before, during, or after these calls. And so we hope as we begin to build our community, we'll get more of those questions flowing as well. So that's me done. Final word, Aaron, to you.
Well, firstly, thank you, Chris. I think it's been a great first episode. I've really enjoyed it. There's obviously a meeting of minds here on so many things. And as Chris said, please do share this with your colleagues and friends, or if anyone who you think will get value out of what we're talking about. We have combined experience, as Chris said, over 65 years probably between the 2 of us in different ways, and some overlap. And there isn't much we haven't seen in dentistry. I remember the days when goodwill was like 30% of turnover, or even less than that. Now we're at, I don't know, 200% of turnover. It's a very different game. And therefore, you need to have your business sense and business nous in this environment. Otherwise, you can get your fingers burnt very, very quickly, and it can be quite ugly. But we're here. We're going to be there. And watch out for the next episode. There's a link on the website, and we'll be sharing that soon, and we'll go from there. But thank you, Chris. Thanks very much. Enjoy the heat.
Thanks to you who's taken some time to follow us on this. Really appreciate
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Cheers.